All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So, the title of this panel sounds kind of ridiculous to big corners once again, right? It's fair. But what I'm going to focus on is two things. One, that a lot of the companies that have done the best in the whole AI surge right now were Bitcoiners. Why? Because, like we talked about, they were sort of the cowboys that were there first, working with people that, frankly, no one else would work with. So, I want to talk a little about that transition, how we've seen the companies like the Presidios, the Satoshis, the Gigas. Actually, don't even know how to say
Cholla.
Choya.
Yeah.
The Choya is a lot of, I was like, holla, like Choya and Choya. But how these companies have evolved, and more importantly, how we see Bitcoin and energy markets fusing. So, um, Andrew, you've already got an introduction. We'll let you guys briefly, 30 seconds. Who are you and what do you do?
Howdy guys. Brent Whitehead, co-founder, COO of Giga Energy. We build and manufacture modular data centers for Bitcoin miners and AI compute, as well as build and manufacture transformers and switchboards. Looking forward to chatting today about how we've relatively right. So everyone, Brad Cuddy, heading up Bitcoin strategy and operations at Cholla. Cholla is a three-generation oil and gas company. Saw the intersection of energy and Bitcoin very early back in 2018. Sold the first spec built substation specifically for digital compute. Gideon affectionately calls himself, he's the CEO, a compute cowboy. And so been in this space ever since, and just trying to be the tip of the spear for energy innovation and abundance for all.
Anything else you want to add, Andrew?
I'm ready for the man.
Yeah. So my first question to you guys is, I know the two of you, I've known Andrew for over 5 years. Apparently we met 5 or 6 years ago before that. I didn't even know. So I have to start with the mea culpa, which is I met these guys and passed. I don't even remember passing because at the time I was like, these are 22-year-old kids. They're doing something pretty complex. I never dreamed, that, okay, they're starting the Bitcoin world. Then all of a sudden they're the only ones making transformers in the world. And I have to say, serious kudos to you. Like, I don't know how much you want to be public about this, but their revenue numbers, I've never seen a coin like this in a year. So congrats to all of you guys on that. I would love to hear from each of you when you got into Bitcoin and mining, like, how much were you already thinking about AI as a potential driver? How much you're thinking that it would always be Bitcoin or other sources? And how much, frankly, have you been surprised to be like, okay, we were in the right place at the right time? Whether we were right or right by luck, like, how do y'all feel about that?
Sure. Yeah, I would say anyone in the Bitcoin space that tells you that they were calling AI from 2019, 2020 is probably lying to you. Really and truly, most of this was a lot of people were right place at the right time. When we started Giga, we actually started as a flare gas Bitcoin mining company. Funny enough, we do not do that anymore. We focus on grid, behind the meter, and infrastructure. Um, what I would say is we knew that, I think someone said it earlier, but quality of life is directly correlated to energy consumption. I forgot that. And we know that the grid needs more power, the world needs more power. And we wanted to, Bitcoin was in a lot of ways was a way to help create and monetize stranded energy, help create and monetize infrastructure needs by, building substations, building, incentivizing renewables in a lot of ways. And so that's what kind of led us into this space of building land and power and securing that. And so we, as we grew into the infrastructure space, started building transformers and things like that. We had no idea that the AI boom was going to occur. It really was right place at right time. And I think that where we stand right now is if you look at any AI site that's become announced on a day-by-day basis, it's 80% Bitcoin company is really true. Like it's really and truly like the Bitcoiners were the cowboys that went out and ventured first, knowing that the grid was going to become constrained, that the world needed more power, and they secured that first. Gideon truly was. I admire him in a lot of ways. The founder of Toya, really and truly, he was the first guy talking about buying out all the land and power around the entire ERCOT. And I think that is kind of where we were positioned and led us to where we're at. Yeah, I think right place, right time. There's a little bit of a stroke of luck. I didn't see it, but I will tell you, Gideon did see it. He saw the location agnostic, latency agnostic compute coming. when Bitcoin mining got banned in China, we as a Cholla went out and bought 15,000 acres around the 345 kV. So that's high voltage switching stations in West Texas. And the idea behind it was the solar belt in the US goes from Southern California to West Texas. The wind belt in the United States goes from North Dakota to West Texas. And West Texas also happens to be the most prolific oil and gas field in the entire world, so, in the Permian Basin. So you've got it's the mecca of energy. And so by buying up that land, like making that bet on, Bitcoin was getting, like I said, a tip of the spear. You can use Bitcoin to monetize that wasted strand of electricity. Nobody was willing to go out to, you know, bump on West Texas. It's like, it's way out there. It's a harsh environment. We're talking about why, I think Shrek was like, why are you going to go, build a case at 110-degree Fahrenheit weather? Like it's a harsh environment. But the fact of the matter is, because the grid flatlines for so long, they weren't building transmission infrastructure. They weren't building new generation. That is the only place where, if you have some flexibility, intermittency, and you can accept some downtime or have the capital to build your redundancy, that's the place where all the energy is.
My story is, before Bitcoin, I was into power markets and machine learning. So when I learned about Bitcoin, I thought about how you connect all three, and in creating Satoshi Energy, looked at what does Satoshi Nakamoto mean. I think it loosely translates to central intelligence or something like that. But the intelligence component was kind of the big thing. So naming Satoshi Energy was like intelligent energy was how I thought about it. I think what I underestimated was how much load growth was going to come from AI data centers. And it's pretty insane to have two generational wealth opportunities in the same decade. So yeah, just leaning into as much AI data center development as we can now as well, and then kind of that future of like an agentic grid where it's not just humans submitting offer curves. It's everybody's got an agent that's doing that for them.
And so for each of you guys, I mean, these are all very good and like honest takes. I really appreciate that. How do you think about for each of your companies moving forward? I mean, I know you guys were Bitcoiners at heart and still are. Obviously, AI is increasingly the buyer of first resort. Bitcoin is, and you always talk about the bottom feeder, the buyer of last resort. How do you think, though, in the coming decade or the coming couple of years, your business is going to change, like in terms of focus on Bitcoin versus AI? Do you see, for example, AI popping now, maybe we're in a short-term bubble, and then, Bitcoin miners come back in for a little bit before things balance out and growth becomes more steady? How do you think about where your focus is going to be in the next couple of years? Answer.
Really tough question. The first about 500 megawatts of products that we developed it was across 3 Bitcoin data centers. The next 700 megawatts are very likely to be AI data centers. I was talking on the panel this morning and talking about kind of the move towards the off grid. I think that makes a lot of sense for AI data centers because they have the capital and already have the need to bring in additional power generation. So I think they can do that in sort of these off grid campuses. And I think that leaves the flexibility and the location agnostic attribute of Bitcoin data centers to really be that grid asset, that grid infrastructure.
Yeah, I think Brandon Quittem writes a nice paper of Bitcoin mining as like a pioneering species. So Bitcoin wants the cheapest electricity. Right now in West Texas, our personal site is curtailing around $70 a megawatt hour. Our revenues are not, they're an order of magnitude less than what these AI data centers are, because we are in such a constrained environment. Prices are going to increase. So I do see in a general Bitcoin mining sense of things, but this liquidity event for these Bitcoin miners is super fortuitous at this point. And then that infrastructure will go out to the places that maybe are a little bit higher risk, that the hyperscalers aren't willing to go deploy in yet. They will help incentivize, build the generation, build the transmission, monetize those electrons until the hyperscalers catch up and are willing to go take on that risk in emerging markets. So what I would say from Giga side, we don't believe in Bitcoin because we started this company. We started this company because Matt and I really believe in Bitcoin. And that has always been a big foundation for our company. However, this this AI wave has been unlike anything I think most of us have ever seen. And I think you got to listen to the market. That's what we really try to focus on. We weren't focused on AI in many ways. Organically, we got pulled into AI. I think most Bitcoiners have had the same thing happen. Whether you're at a mining site, whether you're in infrastructure, organically you get pulled into it because there's so much capital and so much demand coming into this space. And so, what we always like to say is, uh, for a lot of people in Bitcoin, we're a big fish in a small pond. Uh, and the AI space is we're all a little fish in a big pond. And so it's really there's a larger total addressable market, in my opinion, and which is why we focused a lot of attention and resources on the AI space. Um, I think that I think Bitcoin is always going to have a massive play on the electrical grid. Even when you go to AI conferences right now, one of the big things that they talk about for sustainability and for all the typical politically correct jargon they want to talk about, they talk about the flexibility that they need for AI. And I think that's one place that Bitcoin stands out is everyone knows that for a more efficient grid, we need flexibility, um, not just on generation, but on load as well. And I think that Bitcoin solves that. And I think there was an article last year that came out that said Bitcoin mining saved $18 billion or something for ERCOT for ratepayers. Um, we were just talking about this earlier about how between battery, solar, and Bitcoin miners, you have seen a lot of people 3 years ago that said that the volatility was going to get a lot worse on ERCOT. And you're seeing that not be the case. This summer did not have a lot of hours that maxed out on ERCOT that were super high priced. And I think that's because you're seeing the flexibility of the grid do what it's supposed to do, which I think is a big win for all of us in the business that we're in. But I do think that AI is going to continue to grow naturally. This is not whether we're in a bubble from being overcapitalized right now, and things come back to earth. I think regardless, you're going to still see AI continue to grow. I think anyone that says which direction it's going to go is kind of making an assumption right now, and I think that's mostly because you haven't really seen anyone fail yet, right? All these AI sites are being built, everything's coming, all the announcements are happening, but really nobody's flopped yet. And I think that's kind of the unknown that we're in this space is how large is this AI market right now? How much demand is there actually? You see all the press releases and all the people talking about it, but it's kind of a head scratcher. But what I think will continue to happen is these major Bitcoin mining sites are going to be bought up and then going to turn to AI because like Brad was saying, the amount of revenue that you can make off of a large site with Bitcoin mining versus AI is just not even comparable when you look at the two. And I think that's the large sites will continue to become where Bitcoin was kind of the foundation. It got the interconnect, it got the land, and it's going to transition to AI. And I think that that's going to have a lot of redistribution of hash rate into smaller sites, into behind the meter sites that are focused on low uptime that don't need the most of the 5 nines of uptime. And so I think there's a spot for both of them. I think it's going to be interesting to see which one kind of plays out to be the larger player over time.
Totally. So one interesting thing that I was talking about with Bob at lunch or we went is one of our, I think, probably all of our favorite guys. I know for me, Andrew, at least, was Drew Bansel from Unchained. And Drew, he made a conjecture in 2018, which what he calls the Nakamoto point. And I think about this all the time. So among the gold bugs, historically, there was always a question of what percentage of you can call it energy supply, global GDP, roughly proxy for each other, is necessary to secure the monetary supply. And I think for the first time in human history, we're going to be able to answer that question here. And the answer in my mind, I don't know what the answer is. Like we were conjecturing, I said 2%, Bob said 3%. Like some percentage of total energy that we harness is going to be used as the bottom feeder. And maybe it's much more distributed to secure the money that the whole world is using. And the buyers of first resort are the things that are providing the most value to humans. That's probably AI. It's probably things like desalination, eventually quantum computing, green hydrogen. How do you guys feel about that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the whole idea of the Nakamoto point, this idea that there's a
Right.
percentage of
Yeah, we went on a little tailspin there.
it's like, yeah.
I would say with the Nakamoto point, one thing that's important to recognize for anyone who's still curious about Bitcoin in the room is that humans have transitioned to better money many times throughout history, many different types of money. And Bitcoin is objectively the best type of money that we know about today. So I think it's sort of inevitable at this point. We're supposed to come on this panel, and I was the last minute invite, but to say why we were right and why we're still right. So that's why I think it's basically inevitable at this point. So then the question is, when Bitcoin is global money, how much of the energy will go into securing that money? So you can take it to the extreme and say, would 100% of the energy go into Bitcoin if it's the global money? Well, that would mean that humanity has lost its mind beyond what it's already lost today, and that they're just worshiping the money and doing nothing else with energy. So that's not going to happen. Won't be zero because Bitcoin's going to be the global money. And then I think it's just a question of tiers of energy value. So if you're running a hospital that needs super high reliability, like you're going to pay top dollar for that energy. If you're running a manufacturing facility that maybe has a little bit of ability to curtail, you're not going to pay as high for energy. You're going to have battery storage, as I see, is kind of the second layer. It's like, I think of energy storage as like, first use is the economy, producing goods and services. Second layer is energy storage. You store it in the battery and then you sell it back to the grid when it's more valuable. Third layer is Bitcoin. Any final energy that will go to waste will go into Bitcoin mining. So what percentage that ends up at, I don't know. Yes, maybe 5 to 10%.
Cool.
To put some numbers into context, right now the estimate is about 20 gigawatts worth of Bitcoin mining on the grid right now. About 4 gigawatts of that is in Texas, and then like going back to the flexibility, and then there's like 15 gigawatts in batteries. And so that's a considerable amount of load, and why Bitcoin mining in AI is like intertwined in this conversation is because Bitcoin miners did it first. Like, there was no 1 gigawatt hyperscale data center that existed before Stargate, and Crusoe and Lansing built that project. The biggest was, I think, 120, 140, maybe 150 megawatts. And so Riot is 700 megawatts back in like the 2020, and then they had a gigawatt in Corsicana. That was first of its kind. And so the way, like, I agree with Andrew in the fact that they're probably all going to be souped up just because of the just super lack of energy infrastructure right now. And I could see, Bitcoin mining being integrated into heating, like hash rate heat pumps. And I could even see in, 10 years as solar continues to proliferate around the world, that hash rate is simply following the sun. And it's been commoditized to a level that the dollar per compute is so low that it's basically just being used as a heat output, but it is so proliferated, decentralized throughout the entire ecosystem in the energy computing space that it is inherently secure because it is so decentralized and a part of everything. I'm not going to say much because I think both of you guys summed it up really well. But I mean, it goes back to the flexibility thing. I think that Bitcoin is going to continue to gravitate to being the buyer of last resort. There's so much stranded energy still in this world that Bitcoin's able to scoop up and monetize. I think that one thing that we'll see over the coming years is right now we still have a lot of standalone Bitcoin mines that all they do is tie into the grid and mine Bitcoin. I I think over time you're going to see where that's not the case anymore. Someone's not going to just build a Bitcoin mine that's going to be 100% uptime. That's just going to mine Bitcoin. I think it's going to be so competitive because it is this race for strand of power and being the buyer of last resort, where it's going to have a use case of complementing some other type of industry, whether that's backing up, a solar farm or a wind farm, or whether that's heating a city. We did a project in Finland that we built infrastructure for Marathon that they're using hydro equipment to heat a city during the winter. And like, that's a great use case of they're getting dirt cheap power and they're selling heat. They're finding ways to monetize that to bring the cost of energy down. And so I think that you're going to see use cases like that where standalone mine won't really exist. It's going to be, where can you go in and benefit places that there is choice.
Totally. And for those of you who didn't hear this earlier, I mentioned this paper that I worked on in 2021 called Bitcoin is Key to an Abundant Clean Energy Future. It's worth checking that out because one of our theses back then, again, this was 5 years early, but one of our theses was, if you can get the depreciated ASICs once, like, I guess, I don't even know what SATs or whatever are now effectively like $100 or less per ASIC per chip. Then all of a sudden you can mine intermittently. You don't need it with you all the time. I think we're still kind of ways to go, but I think Tomas was hinting at his project in Argentina. Finally, we're starting to see that sort of depreciated thing with pencil. So that's a pretty exciting thing. And I also think you're going to see some kind of interesting use cases where maybe you have ASICs actually in like the inverters of the solar panel. So imagine every home on the planet, to Ali's point, has distributed generation, and there's a little chip in there that in real time you have a software that says, do I mine, do I sell, do I store, whatever. So I've got one more question, particularly for Brent, and then we're going to get on to a few more questions, and we'll get one final panel for you guys, which is going to be awesome. So if you have questions on these guys, get those together. My final question right now is with Brent, actually. We talked about Bitcoin, but the thing that I know you guys best for Giga is name transformers. Who here knows like what a transformer is? If you don't, maybe explain what the hell a transformer is, why it's so valuable, and how you guys ended up being the only company I know of that makes these here in the United States. Is that true?
So to be clear, we make switchboards in the United States. Our transformer production in the US, being US built transformers, will actually be February of 2026. So we're very, very close, very excited.
You're a cat, right? Long Beach?
I wish. It's actually that was in Houston. So I'm sorry.
Something's a
I'll not go on. I think the city of office.
Who got specific Presidio?
No, so I'm not a transformer expert. I'm just a land and power guy, to be clear, but I will do my best to explain it. Anyone that doesn't know what a transformer is, you have transmission lines that are running at a very high voltage that needs to be transformed down into a lower voltage. Every single substation has a transformer, and so it's a necessity to build out infrastructure, regardless whether it's Bitcoin mining, whether it's AI, whether it's a large manufacturing facility, whether it's an apartment. They all need to drop down voltage and have a step down. And so what we did is we actually got into the transformer game mainly because we were selling the modular data centers and people were saying, hey, you have transformers, and we saw the need there. Quickly, we then started looking and realizing that the lead times were insane on these.
5 years?
High voltage, you can see 5 to 6 years. Medium voltage, I think it came down some, but at one point in time, it was a year plus for sure. And the thing was no one could get them. The other problem that we saw was people were just selling really shitty quality transformers. There were so many people, so many people that were just popping up overnight selling transformers. And so our goal was, can we focus on there's a global supply chain shortage here, and how can we take U.S. based engineering and take this global supply chain, bring it all together, build quality transformers that are able to service the needs of outdated. I think someone was saying it before, talking about Giga Shaw, but the grid hasn't updated in 100 years, and I hate to always bring up China, but if you go to China, everyone always shifts on China. But if you go to China and look at their grid and their infrastructure, it's leaps and bounds ahead of us. And we are, I would say, our grid and the critical infrastructure like transformers is really a national security threat in a lot of ways. And I think you're seeing this play out right now, where if we can't build the AI demand, and it was like this a few years ago for Bitcoin, a lot of hash rate, luckily, is came over to the US. I think that's going to help us with being a country that has global dominance long term by having the majority of hash rate here. But the same thing's going to apply for AI. If we can't build it here, it's going to go elsewhere, right? And we want that innovation here. We want that productivity to be here to create jobs, to create revenue. And so that's what led us into that space. And I think that it's going to be crucial to continue to bring U.S. based manufacturing for critical infrastructure that to grow over.
Badass, because it's rare as an entrepreneur to have tackle something as big as we're actually going to transform. So seriously, kudos. Question is,
so why isn't there been a lot of focus on standardization and efficiency in the Bitcoin world, like the mining world? Do you see that changing a lot? Because you can compare that fair miners of like traditional data centers, like You don't even have traditional backgrounds and stuff. Why do you think that is? And when do you think that's going to change?
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyone that asks questions, try and yell as much as you can. So the question was basically, why do we have standardization in the miners? We don't even have standardized wrap space. Where did we get that?
I think Bitcoin mining probably from 2017 to 2021 was pretty fast and loose. It wasn't to the scale it is now. And then the ASIC manufacturers kind of don't listen to their customers. And the customers will be like, we got 700 megawatts, we just gotta go. Block protos here, they're trying to change the narrative on that. And now that we are doing directed chip hydro mining, that is on a standard like 19-inch 2U server style. And that is standardized, whether it's 2U or 3U, but they've adapted to that. I think it's a manufacturer not needing to listen to its customers type of deal, to be honest.
And I would say, not talking them on the spot, but the block team, I would say, is the first like real company that's not Bitmain, and Bitmain is not only Chinese, but also like pretty good. So
I was just going to add, I do think it was a lot of, you look at the past 10 years and the iterations that occurred have been unbelievable. Anyone that was here in the early days of the S9s probably still has calluses on their fingers from having to physically plug in the PSUs to the ASICs, and it's things have iterated, things have changed. I do think we're reaching a point where it is kind of standardizing to a traditional data center look, where it's a rack mounted solution. But one thing I will say is I actually think ASICs and Bitcoin miners have standardized and are further along than the GPU market for AI, in my opinion. Like if you go back to 2022, people were saying, I can't keep up with the changes that are happening with ASICs. It's not really a discussion that happens as much anymore with Bitcoin mining. That is the discussion that's happening right now in the AI space. Like, look at the power density of racks that has changed. I think NVIDIA is trying to do a 1 megawatt rack now. And so I would say that one thing that I think has been really interesting, not to say that Bitcoiners were right, is I think the Bitcoiners is in a lot of ways a foreshadow of a lot of the same things that are happening in AI, right? Like it was ASICs were changing. It was this massive boom of where can you put any compute, to kind of having more actual legitimate applications that they need to be installed. What kind of standardization is there on the equipment? That's kind of what's the same things that Bitcoiners have seen is the same things that the AI market is seeing right now. And even you brought up the older generation ASICs, which I think is really interesting about putting them somewhere that's really cheap power that can just run at low uptime. That's now starting to happen, believe it or not, in the AI space. The amount of imbalance that we get of people that want to run H100s that are considered the outdated GPUs and just rip them somewhere with no redundancy and just have any amount of compute possible, I think is really fascinating. And I think that you're going to be able to watch a lot of things that happen in the Bitcoin cycle that we had from 2020 till now. And you're going to see a lot of the same characteristics kind of play out in the AI space, in my opinion.
One thing I'd maybe add to that is just in general, like in real time, the way I'm seeing this is, energy has been a deeply slow, sporadic, and that sense energy first, industry first. And so for those people, there are very few of us that liked energy. Many of those people are in the room. In fact, everyone here in the room, like, we're kind of the weirdos, like, and, just like a Bitcoiners, you're kind of the weirdos. Like, to be an energy nerd is kind of like, why? Up until recently. And I think what's interesting is the Bitcoiners were kind of forced to learn about the energy industry. And some people like Andrew came in from reverse, but in general, because that's what we had to do. Right. And so I think similarly in that paper I mentioned, I could have just as easily written that in 2026 as in 2021, saying Bitcoin is key to an abundant clean energy future, and saying AI is key to an abundant clean energy future, or low growth is key to an abundant clean energy future. Right. I think that's the takeaway from me. Okay. Other questions?
So a number I have in my head is runs out dated. Total battery production capacity on Earth is about 1% of what is needed for grid scale storage. These as you guys have all said is that, Bitcoin is a bottom feeder, right? And most of the lowest price energy. And that is in some sense a fact that the artifact, the fact that you can't store energy. We have sodium ion batteries, or in some sense already on the market coming. Lithium ion is growing. This number I have in my head is old. So first question, how long do you think it's going to take before energy storage technologies can match what is needed for the grid? And B, what do you think the world looks like when you can install a solar farm with a co-located equivalent amount of storage capacity? What does that look like for Bitcoin mining?
Great questions. Andrew?
How long do you think it's going to take? Questions are always impossible to answer. I have no idea. I think the panel the panel about robotics, right? Like robotic manufacturing of the data center containers, of installing solar panels, of creating the solar panels. What I will say is I think it can happen exponentially fast, right? When the machines start to build the machines and they build more machines, like it's off to the races. That's my general opinion.
This isn't really answered your question, but I'm going to give you just an anecdotal example of what's going on with like the synergies between Bitcoin mining and solar. I know of a project that is being repaneled, and panels are 15 years old, double the efficiency, same footprint, so they're going to have double the output. So they're bringing Bitcoin mining because you can just put it in shipping containers, co-locate it. Doesn't matter if it's the desert, the swamp, doesn't matter. They're gonna repanel it, consume the excess of Bitcoin mining while they're waiting for their substation, like their breakers, their transformer to get installed, and monetize that excess before the ITC run out. And so, doesn't answer, but it's just a cool example of what the synergies.
I mean, one thing I'll throw out really quickly is I want to hear your answer, Grant. I would love to hear your answer too, Bob. You probably have a good answer. But one thing I would just encourage everyone to remember from our panels this morning that Andrew was on is the good news is we don't have to answer that question because the market will answer it for us. And so the big thing I would always push on is price signals are the answer. And so, if we get to the point where batteries are so damn cheap that maybe they outcompete Bitcoin miners in a lot of spaces, great. And I see where the Bitcoin miners are going to do really well there in that world is, okay, what are things where you don't want to use a battery? For example, maybe, like I said, you have a little AC chip in your solar inverter. It's like, well, that's not even going to fit in there. And if you want to have really small microtransaction level storage, it makes more sense to have an ASIC than it does to have additional storage capacity. Or maybe for whatever reason, you really want to be able to get some like good old fashioned clean SaaS. And, you want to pay a premium for that. So I think there's a good hard lines for it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything close to that technical. I know very little about battery storage other than I usually have to do town hall meetings when we build a site, convincing them that we're not putting in battery storage because they seem to, town seems to hate it. Why anything? They think it's going to discharge things into the water and it's going to set a whole place on fire. And it's, you always have a care in every community that's upset about something. But the one thing I will say that I was just going to add to that is you brought up that, the problem is right now is that we can't store energy. And for anyone here that's not into Bitcoin, and not into Bitcoin mining, I will say the one difference is I don't agree with the idea of like, we can't store energy anymore because Bitcoin is energy. And so I think that's why this has taken off so much is, you trade your time right now, if you're sitting on salary at your job working for money, then it's you storing energy into something that you can spend later for other energy. And I would say that is why I do think that is where this is becoming very compelling. And yes, it doesn't work from like a real time on grid perspective, but I do think that is something to understand of like storage of energy isn't just battery storage. Like Bitcoin truly is like a storage of energy, and the fact that you are monetizing that energy at that real time and you're storing it. And that's kind of the whole purpose of why we started flare gas mining at the beginning was you couldn't store it in that thing, you couldn't transport it, but you could create value out of that energy. It wasn't wasted. And so that's where I think it's going to eliminate a lot of waste from the electrical grid by being able to store that wasted energy in some sort of that.
Yeah. And again, everything's a battery. So you should see, well, there's lots of different kinds of batteries. Price them also answer. Sure. Is my opinion. Any other last questions? Yeah. One last question. The non-promotional point.
I think I can provide some color there. There are two economical use cases to mine Bitcoin. One of them is map shaping energy demand, which load. There's two sides of that. You have too much energy, you mine Bitcoin with it. If you don't have enough, you're going to turn your lines off. The other side of the coin, the other economical use case is recapturing the heat that your Bitcoin miner produces.
I think this is really going to be key in driving out of again, I want to direct you guys to the hash rate beating movement. Just look at the book. It's amazing. Well, I think the thing I don't have on top of it, 80 chapter. It's called the comfort deep market. These are people who are heating their homes, heating their water, HVACs, and hot tubs. We capture 1% of that market. It's like triple the amount of energy that is used in one Bitcoin today. And if you're using electric heating to heat your water here, like you're gonna go to Bitcoin AC solution because it will be exactly the same, 100% efficient electric heater, but it produces Bitcoin on the side. You can heat that Bitcoin for yourself.
Super interesting. So super distributed, heat pump. I got to learn more as well. Okay, can we get a please be a round of applause for that?